SBNs, enfim, mais focado em drenagem. Eu conheci por acaso, né? Há 2 anos atrás eu estava na Índia, dando um curso em Chennai nessa área, e conheci um projeto incrível que chama 1000 Tanks, 1000 tanques, que era uma maneira de reaproveitar os tanques de abastecimento, de poços, né, com degraus que são da tradição da Índia, para abastecimento e drenagem, né? E eu achei aquilo incrível, conversando com os colegas que estavam de lá, que estavam apresentando, e aí, uma hora, eu descobri que aquilo tinha sido feito em parceria, numa colaboração, com um grupo holandês, né? E fui atrás do grupo e aí conheci a Eva e o Sylvain, né, o trabalho deles, e soube que eles já tinham vindo para cá em 2017, fazer na Bienal de 2017, enfim, isso é um contexto interessante, né? O outro são 2 indianas que estão num grupo que chama urbz. É isso que fala? Urb. Eu não sei porque. Urb. E elas trabalham com questões participativas nesse enfoque também e vão trazer a sua contribuição. E o último, espero que ele chegue, é o Martin, que foi um dos curadores do pavilhão francês na Bienal de Veneza, que a gente tem uma mostra aqui, e hoje ele também vai falar um pouco sobre isso. Então, a gente tem temas aqui que se encadeiam, né, mas não tão relacionados como nas mesas anteriores. Tá? Cláudia, por favor. Obrigado por ter aceito o convite.
Oi, gente, é um prazer estar aqui. Meu nome é Claudia Visoni, eu vou ser mediadora dessa conversa. A gente vai começar com a apresentação da Eva Pfannes e depois da Samidha e da Kareena, que estão aqui, e a gente está esperando o Martin. Vocês vão anotando as perguntas. Quando acabarem as 3 apresentações, a gente senta aqui e faz essa conversa. Estamos previstos para ficar aqui até as 8h30 da noite, e acho que vai ser muito bom ver esse debate e as apresentações, né? A Eva é holandesa, cofundadora da Ooze. Ela é especializada em estratégias urbanas, infraestrutura verde-azul, conceitos de desenvolvimento que tanto focam na mitigação das mudanças climáticas quanto adaptação. E tem um currículo que acabaram de me passar, que tem umas 20 páginas. Então, ela vai se apresentar e vai começar a apresentação dela, e daqui a pouco eu volto aqui para a gente fazer a introdução da Kareena e da Samidha. Então, Eva, com você, é um prazer.
Obrigada. Okay, thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Renato, for the invitation. I'm very honored, together with my partner, Sylvain Hartenberg, to be here, to be exhibited in this beautiful Oka building, part of this amazing exhibition. And I would like to share our work with you today. I called my talk Urgências d'Água, because we are in a great need to deal with water. Ooze, the name of our practice, means actually the 2 things: the primordial mud at the bottom of the ocean and a very slow flowing process. And so water and this idea of a process is always something that's present in our work. this is Between the Waters, the Emscher Community Gardens. It's one of the first projects we made that deals with infrastructure. We have here a very polluted river. We have a very, very small sewage treatment station. Am I standing too close to the... It's okay? Yeah, okay. A very small sewage treatment station that deals with the sewage from the toilet with nature-based solutions, collects rainwater and renders it drinkable. That becomes eventually beer, so we invited an artist to make beer from the recycled treated water, and that brought an aspect of joy and community and placemaking to this rather abstract idea that is sustainability. So that is something we always trying in our work. This is the of Soil and Water, the King's Cross Pond Club, the first public swimming pond in London without any chemicals, in the middle of a very large building site next to Central St. Martin's University. And that project was a temporary project, otherwise it actually couldn't have happened. Too many administrative hurdles to jump. And it became a place that was very much loved by the community. We had, in the end, we had a community, a very diverse group. 5,000 signatures were collected. And the word that was most mentioned in the petition was the word love, after swimming, obviously. So people, through this, really created a very strong bond to the place. And so water, when we think about water, it's really, it seems infinite. It seems there is so much of it, and we wouldn't need to bother thinking about it. It always comes out of the tap. If we really look into it, we realize that water is very finite on the planet. And that tiny, tiny dot here that you see, the lakes, rivers, 36 cube kilometer, is actually all that we have available for drinking. So we can understand how much we must take care of it and how actually it kind of, how would you say, it is in conflict with the economy of eternal growth. So here what we see is actually a model. It's called the circular flow model of the economy. It's the model that still young students see when they enter university. And it shows the flow of goods and services and money between households and businesses. What is remarkably absent from this model is actually nature. Is the flow of natural goods that are actually the inputs. The only costs which are in this model is the costs it takes to, for instance, cut trees, to extract oil, but not the resource itself. What's also remarkably absent is the waste that is produced. So that leads actually to a situation in which, over time, more and more, these conflicts become larger and larger and eventually actually threaten this endless growth of economy. And what we realized that there is another model possible that integrates the flow of nature, that is embedded in nature in ways that takes into account the resources, the materials that Earth produces. And this is the so-called donut model developed by Kate Raworth. And why am I showing this in an architecture biennial? Because actually these type of models are also reflected in the type of cities that we see. So we have cities that are built on linear processes, and we can have cities that are built on the cyclical processes of nature. So from a city like here, so here you see a city that's creating externalities, that is taking water from very far away resources, that's consuming the water and expelling the water untreated or half-treated with sewage treatment stations. We're looking in our work to close the cycle, to create a paradigm shift and to internalize all these processes to restore and heal the territory. Now, this process of metabolism of a city is actually almost as if our body, all the organs would be placed outside. So if we imagine all the waste that's coming, all the resources that come from outside, and we can see that this is not only very costly, but also very fragile, because those connections can be cut. So in our work, we try to integrate this into the body that is the city. So coming from a contained model that depends on the relationship with the hinterlands to integrate into an isotropic model that is a fractable and expandable. We're doing this with nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions are different than the traditional gray infrastructure that you see here on the right side, like desalination plants, sewage treatment plants, and stormwater drains that have only one function, that is either to get water or to get rid of water, whereas engineered nature-based solutions, so-called engineered ecosystems, have many other benefits, all of which I will explain in the talk. When we zoom into, in detail, in the services that plants can give us, we see here a section through the constructed wetland where we see these plants, the helophyte plants, typha, for instance. With their roots, they give oxygen, and through that oxygen, there actually is many different microorganisms that set in motion a food chain. So small bacteria get eaten by protozoa, get eaten by worms, which get eaten by birds. And those are these type of roots that treat our wastewater. Now, when we started after these projects you saw in the beginning that were in the art context, we then developed this model further in Rio de Janeiro. And since we're here in Brazil, I want to show this before the project in India. You see here also you see here in the center the model of the house, how that house is now integrated within the hydrological cycle with a septic tank, the constructed wetland that brings water that can be recycled, that is then evaporated and comes back as rain. And that's what I mean when we say we integrate it. We also see that this is happening in our body with our kidneys, our lungs, which are oxygenating our blood. These systems take actually a lot less space than the traditional gray infrastructure. They are visible rather than invisible below the ground. Therefore, they're more attractive for investment, but they also create cooling through the evaporation. They create a healthy environment that is beautiful. So when we started working in Rio de Janeiro in 2012, we interviewed a lot of different engineers, scientists, activists, community leaders in different areas in the city to get an idea of what's going on and how it was possible that for instance, Rio Carioca, that is clean 5 kilometers later, looks like this. This is in the Morro da Formiga. And we then developed a model that is actually upgrading the situation in the informal settlements with these small kidney-like insertions that collect. So the idea is that water comes from the mountains, from the Mata Atlantica. It is then used, it's becoming collected in these small septic tanks and then is treated communally in these decentralized nodes to then render the water of the river clean. And so what we did here was also to take the, let's say, boring aspects of infrastructure and design with them. And also that's an ambition that we still have, that's going through all our work, that takes the boring investment in infrastructure and generate with that civic space and local businesses. And so here we see how that actually, that upgrading looks when these these constructed wetlands and rainwater collection is inserted in the community. This is Mora Formiga, which is upgraded. This is the upgrade of Rio das Pedras, one of the biggest one, 100,000 inhabitants. And Agua Carioca actually means one thing, that means actually deal with the local water that is available right there at this place. We built then a pilot project in the sito Roberto Borle Marx that shows here all the elements, the septic tank, the toilet, the collection tank, and the constructed wetland. We actually worked with an artist to actually also explain on the pilot what's going on. We had many exhibitions in Studio Shish and in the sito Roberto Borle Marx. And the project won many prizes, also the Lafarge Holcim Prize for Latin America. And we got invited for the 11th São Paulo Architecture Biennial. We made a small project in Sapé with a graffiti, with a barbecue, and many locals came to reimagine actually the river and find locations on where interventions would be possible and map that right there in the community. From this project, that was in 2018, we won a large tender of the Dutch government called Water as Leverage for Resilient Cities Asia. We started the project, the City of 1,000 Tanks, with a team of local collaborators, IIT Madras, Care Earth Trust, NGOs, architects, Madras Terrace, and TU Delft, HKV. So it was a very mixed team that the call was actually for 3 Asian cities at the time. In the meantime, it's also busy in, for instance, Cartagena in Colombia. Here we see our team with the Dutch water envoy at the time, Henk Ovink. I would like now in the next 15 minutes to explain how this project actually works in more detail. We started with a diagnostic, understanding the local natural and social systems. We see here the Indian subcontinent, that with all its rivers that flow over the continent and heat up and create then, when they flow in the Bay of Bengal, this pattern, intense monsoon pattern, where all the water comes down in almost only 2 months, so that's quite different than here in Brazil. Traditionally, this was dealt with solutions in plants, solutions in soil. Much of the soil is actually favorable to recharge as a small, you see here, small clay layer and then the sand layer, and solutions in heritage. So the ancestors built these temple tanks that actually function like inverted pyramids. So when it's raining, they collect the rain from the watershed, then they recharge this rain into the aquifer, into the water table. It becomes groundwater. Just before the next monsoon, the temple tank is emptied, can be cleaned and desilted, and the process starts again. Now the city is actually suffering from these floods and from the droughts, and this ancient system doesn't work anymore. In 2019, Chennai suffered an extreme drought. Water had to be brought in by train into the city. At the same time, water should be abundant. When we look here, we see the footprint of Chennai. The rainfall that falls in the city is much more than the city actually needs. And we see here, this is an image of 1956. This is a kind of a sponge land, we can say, with many thousands of lakes, so-called eries, that do the same as the temple tanks, but then in the countryside. And now these lakes have been encroached and built into, so the flood that we saw is actually mostly man-made and cannot be attributed to climate change, but to the way the cities, and this is not only Chennai, this is now cities all over the world, and where 5 years ago this maybe was mostly in the global south, this situation has very much caught up with Europe. All the cities we build have too much asphalt and concrete and are too sealed, and become alien to water. They don't welcome water anymore. Many of the temple tanks actually had concreted bottoms that prevented this absorption from functioning. Water became more decorative. And when we go into the future, we actually see that the situation will become worse. We have climate, temperatures are rising, rainfall is shrinking, it's becoming more intense, and we have the sea level that's rising. Next to that, we have also the intense pollution that is happening because we have become so alienated from the environment, which then leads to methane from the exposed sewage, but it also leads to carbon emissions from the water tankers that have to provide people with the water that they cannot access locally anymore. And so from this, we developed our narrative, the City of Thousand Tanks, that looks at how the city can go from a model, the current model of scarcity, to a model of abundance. Or in other words, from a current system of business as usual to a water balance model. So on the left side here, you see a so-called octopus that has the lakes around Chennai. They're up to 200 kilometers outside. You see the desalination plants that at great expense actually bring fresh water into the city that's then consumed. It ends up to a large part as untreated sewage that pollutes the aquifer because of its flat topography, and it's flowing into the sea. The aquifer is diminished and polluted, and saline water is coming in. And so you can see that on the right side, the footprint is much, much smaller. We can actually, 50% of the water we use, and again, this is not just for Chennai, this is really everywhere, 50% of the water we use doesn't need to be potable. It could be recycled. And here we want to do this with inserting these nature-based solutions right into the city. Here we created a toolbox. None of this is actually our invention. All these solutions exist. The only thing here is to put it in relation to each other and to start to make it and think about it and design with it in a systemic way. So we see here forests, natural wetland reserves, green roofs. We see how roads and squares can actually collect water and be connected to bioswales that treat the water, that then we can create new tanks, historic tanks, and renaturalize rivers. And in this way, we can, with all this rainwater, collect it, this precious resource, and recharge the aquifer. And here we see the footprint of Chennai with an excerpt here, a diameter of 1 kilometer. So that's actually from this central tank, it takes 1 year for water to travel 500 meters in the aquifer. So it's very slow, but by multiplying this and with many different tanks, we can achieve the City of 1,000 Tanks. That is cheaper to build and run. It's more environmentally friendly. It reduces the carbon footprint, and it's more dependent on the local ecosystem. We then built, that was during the pandemic in 2022 to 2023, we built a demonstration model, the water balance pilot, in a school for blind and deaf girls, around 4 hectares next to the Mambalam Canal, with the same urgencies than the city itself. So overflow, backflow of wastewater, which is especially troubling in the situation of the school, frequent flooding of the whole campus. And we designed here redesigned the campus with a central element, a central park for treating and recharging the wastewater. Then we harvest the rainwater to recharge the groundwater. Here next to it, you see those 2 flows in the water balance calculation that we did with our engineers coming together. And then here you see how we then built these different aspects. So you see the anaerobic part, so that's these tanks that function actually without any oxygen. that only function with the bacteria that are in our body, that are the good ones, and that they take over to clean. Then we have the aerobic process with the constructed wetlands. We have an effluent tank, and then you see those grooves, and these are below the park. So in there are pipes with holes, and the effluent, so the treated wastewater, is irrigating the whole park, which is then cooling the whole campus. And then here below you see the rainwater wells that actually punch through the clay layer to recharge into the aquifer. We see here the whole campus now at the heart. We see how this campus is actually used to also teach the next generation. The pilot itself becomes the campaigner for biodiversity. We see a moon goose here. We see beautiful plants, bird of paradise that we also have here in Brazil. And the SDP is directly in the heart of the campus. It becomes here, it's designed as a stage. And it's becoming part of the life of the Little Flower Convent school. We see here our maintenance team that is taking care over many years. We monitor this water chemistry. So you see here from the anaerobic part to the water tank, the improvement in the quality. So we monitor the water chemistry and the different stations where we can take it out. We also monitor the water quantity with a sort of remote monitoring, and that is also that's a really important tool actually. Why we now with digital technology we can actually combine and connect the different relocalized and decentralized distributed system into one system. Then from the pilot, we learn many issues. I've talked to some colleagues. So for instance, the smell can be an issue. We had the same. So we used effective microorganism treatment, so insertion of specific microorganisms to deal with that. We see here the opening of the pilot and the Minister of Water Supply opening, cutting the rope. We had many good press from the opening of the pilot. People are happy to propagate that there is hope and there are solutions for these problems. We created and participated with our knowledge to some international reports for UN Habitat and the OECD Handbook for Nature-Based Solutions. The World Bank currently is very interested to learn about the maintenance of these systems. And we have a set of happy clients. Now, how can we upscale with this systemic framework? How can we contribute to the targets? Flood prevention, drought prevention, sanitation, and improved urban environment. You have here all the measures that I mentioned already, and maybe additional to this, the solid waste recycling and the adaptive buildings. So building in another way so that actually also vulnerable communities can coexist in difficult situations. We then chose 4 flagship projects with the community to become the first projects. One of them here is the Mylapore project in a historically and culturally significant location. That's also prominent on our panel upstairs in the exhibition. So we see here how the city is not seen just in a sort of surface, but really in a section as well, and how all those different tanks, especially here the Kabaleswara temple tank in the center, contributes to recharge, and how in that way the hydrological cycle is included within the city. Here, this is a technical section. We see those bioswales around the temple tank with the associated rainwater wells. And we see that situation in a dry, during the dry summer months, and we see that during the monsoon when the temple tank can be filled. We then prepared this project as an application for the Green Climate Funds. And there you really have to, let's say, package it and think very carefully how different components are grouped together. So we have here preparation, then the build and structural components, and the operation and maintenance components. All this functions together to give a performance that becomes measurable. So here, when we upscale this to 53 different temple tanks across Chennai, one could get up to 50 million liter per day of recharge volume. And so here we have the other 3 flagship projects, so an adaptive housing program, a green industries program, and a smart waterways program that all have different replication sites. So for instance, we see here, this is in the adaptive housing program, up to 3-meter flooding. We have here designed, for instance, detention tanks that can function as playgrounds during the summer. They can be flooded, and they can offer people also relief on the roofs, so they don't need to leave their houses. They can find retreat on their roofs. We have then the green waterways program that transform the canals in the city to be attractive parks. So here we see where this is more or less located in the city. And we have here how the whole program is rolled out from the initial pre-feasibility phase that was funded by the Dutch government. Then we have the field trial that was the pilot, and right now we're in the feasibility phase where we prepare for the flagship to eventually prepare for pilots and a city norm. Now, what are the benefits? And what was very special about this Water as Leverage program was that we worked with international financial institutions. And these institutions, they needed to see numbers. When we came with the design, they actually didn't understand what we wanted to talk about. They said we need to see Excel sheets. We need to see what are the benefits. What are the benefits for water? For instance, here it looks very complicated. I just want to say that over time, if the urban demand increases, and we extract more and more, that leads to a groundwater deficit. So that's like akin to a bank. You have actually no money or no water in the bank anymore. And if we take actually the water that we use every day, 24/7, we recycle this, we treat it, and we recharge it to the groundwater. We take a bit of rainwater, we can create a surplus. So we have, in fact, a saving in the bank. We also then looked at the operational costs, and here we see, because nature, all the plants actually function literally for free. And that's why the operational costs are actually less costly than the grey infrastructure. Plants also absorb carbon, they prevent carbon emissions, so we have less carbon emissions. Then the SDG framework, which is very holistic, is actually important to contribute to for the international financial institutions. So we looked at the social benefits, for instance, more productivity in water sourcing, and that's a very gender-related problem, not only in India, but also, for instance, in Africa and in Kathmandu, where we work currently. And then we calculated the overall benefits. And here you see how actually nature-based solutions, then they start to work when you connect different areas. So when you connect, for instance, productivity, when you connect loss of income and business during disaster situations, when you connect the long-term health expenses with the water savings and the prevention that water costs won't explode in the future because water is produced locally. Now, this is basically just what we called the exit strategy, so the payback mechanism. It's an idea that water payback, like how do we finance all these nature-based solutions in the city? And it can actually work similar to how solar energy is functioning with a payback, like we discussed. And what is interesting here, that if the water is recharged locally, it doesn't need to travel anymore long distances. So this was, let's say, the very technical part. And of course, as we know all, the difficulty is not really the technical part. We all know that theoretically the technical part can function. But what's very difficult to achieve is actually the governance. How do we actually move forward? How do we implement the system in a democratic country like India? We had many, many meetings with government officials, with administrators, with bureaucrats, with the international financial institutions, and we have our engagement strategies that were mainly supported by the Goethe Institute. We have a program. We asked people how much of their vulnerability actually is related to water, and they said 60% of their vulnerability is related to water. We looked at the OECD principles on water governance, effectiveness, efficiency, and building trust and engagement, and adapted those principles to our project. So, for instance, building towards a watershed governance, building learning programs, understanding existing structures, creating knowledge that can be shown on a dashboard, and participating in public festivals and our Water Ambassadors campaign. So we integrated all voices, very inclusive process. We used the same type of graphics that we used for the banks to actually speak to the children, which was funny because the children actually understand it very easily. Let's say they're not polluted yet by the economic logic. And we have the children here developed a logo, the mascot Tuli, that became the center figure for the animation films that explain the complex subjects such as water governance. We then have many different reports, and currently we're working on an upscaling program where we look at private sectors. So how could industries, hospitals, hotels, and developers take up a model like this? This is just a kind of overall idea of this process where over time, from a very short-term local prototype, one can learn for the long-term regional planning strategy and build in between milestones and feedback loop moments. So that is my lecture. And here is just an outlook on the city of São Paulo, the city of many rivers, and how possibly one could imagine and start thinking about how such a model could be possible in Brazil. Thank you.
Parabéns, Eva. Muito obrigada.
I have a 1.5 minute film.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we can still show it.
Parabéns, Eva. Muito obrigada pela apresentação, pelo filme. Assim, você mostra para a gente que a água o manejo de água pode ser a diferença entre a água na paisagem ser prazer ou guerra, né? Saúde ou doença. E me chamou a atenção quando você fala que a dificuldade não é técnica, é a governança. Então, quero te agradecer o filme também. A gente que trabalha com soluções baseadas na natureza aqui também tem muita dificuldade de explicar o óbvio. Então, assim, é muito bom. O óbvio não é óbvio ainda. Então, muito bom. Obrigada. Agora a gente vai ouvir a experiência da urbz, que temos aqui duas representantes, né, a Kareena e a Samidha, que é um coletivo de arquitetura que trabalha muito baseado em soluções coletivas, participativas, sociais, né, desde 2008, fundado em Mumbai. E acho que vai ser um prazer ver essa apresentação e entender aí as pesquisas que vocês têm feito, os resultados que vocês têm atingido. Vou pedir que, antes de começar, façam uma pequena apresentação do urbz, que eu acho que na voz de vocês fica mais completo, mais adequado. Muito obrigada. E depois a gente vai ouvir o Martin, e em seguida, após a apresentação do Martin, a gente vai ter o nosso debate. Por favor, Samidha e Kareena.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. We wanted to say thank you to Eva for a very brilliant presentation and showing a way to, to see how global experts can engage very sensitively with the urban Indian context. So let's begin. I'm Kareena.
I'm Samidha.
And we're super grateful to be in Sao Paulo to present the work that we're doing in urbz Mumbai. So to tell you a bit about urbz, urbz was founded by Rahul Srivastav, who is an anthropologist, and Matthias Echenove, an economist and urban planner. So as place-based practitioners, they laid the foundation of a radical participatory planning approach. Over the years, our Mumbai team has grown to include Bharat, Jay, Isha, and the two of us. So we are an action and research collective specialized in participatory urban planning and design. We have expertise in anthropology, economics, urban planning, landscape architecture, and architecture. urbz was born in 2008 in the neighborhood of Dharavi, Mumbai, and we now have offices in Geneva, Bogota, and Paris. So what is Dharavi? For those of you who haven't heard, Dharavi is infamously known as Asia's largest slum. But to us, it has been a place from which we have learned many things. Our presentation today is divided into two sections. In the first part, we lay the foundation by sharing three main learnings that form the core of our participatory methodology. We then talk about Sacred Waters, a project of ours which is exhibited at the Biennale.
In Dharavi, we developed confidence in ability of people to collectively produce their own habitats, even in the most difficult conditions, through which we formed our motto, user-generated cities. We work with communities and local economy by working with local artisans and building contractors. We conduct exhibitions to facilitate discourse between residents, academics, and practitioners. We host workshops for students, residents, and civic officials. We do action research and like to write for publications and our website. We also like to tell stories and through books and films. So here we actually come to our first learning from Dharavi. After nearly 2 decades in Dharavi, we have learned the importance of recognizing what is right before our eyes, recognize the massive efforts and skills that communities possess, which enable them to produce dynamic habitats like Dharavi.
So communities around the world have engaged in the very human act of making, whether it be art, crafts, homes, or the built environment, using whatever resources they had at hand. If you take a walk down any neighborhood, it becomes evident that the built environment is not comprised of material objects alone, but is an extension of the social, economic, cultural, and gendered life of the neighborhood, which animates and creates it. So it's no surprise that professional designers and architects contribute just a fraction to the built environment, while local communities contribute the most. There is a huge gap between urban plans and ground realities, and a need to understand how people produce places like Dharavi, which are culturally and economically diverse neighborhoods, where urban form is in constant communication with the needs of the community. Our practice, excuse me. Our practice tries to make bridges between the way planners, architects, and designers think about placemaking and the way communities actually make place. We have been trying to bridge the realm of architecture as a professional practice with the realm of architecture as a collective cultural practice where communities shape their own environments.
Habitats produced by marginalized communities are seen as informal, while built environment produced through policies are considered formal. In the foreground, in the foreground of this image, you can see a habitat produced by the people, the residents themselves, whereas in the background, you can see buildings or housing, affordable housing produced by the Slum Redevelopment Authority of Mumbai. Habitats produced by people directly cater to the needs of the inhabitants, while the neighborhood produced by affordable housing policies mostly fail, and this we have been saying constantly. The Mumbai metropolitan region has a population of about 27 million, with the neighborhood of Dharavi in red. Dharavi is just about 2.5 square kilometers in size and support almost 1 million inhabitants who have come from different marginalized communities from different parts of the country to seek livelihood in the big city. It is not only the residential neighborhood, but has optimized every space to function as a site of production. It has a thriving economy with a turnover that is estimated to be around 500 million to $1 billion US per year. Dharavi is a place produced with the direct participation of its residents, with no professional planners or civic officials. The local builder, contractors, and his team of masons and artisans work with people's need to build various structures for housing to workshops to, from housing to workshops to factories. Instead of using terms like slum or informal, we call these neighborhoods as homegrown neighborhoods, built by the collective intelligence of the communities that reside in them.
So Dharavi is home to many industries like leather, pottery, plastic recycling, glass and metal fabrication, and manufacturing of garments. Here are a few glimpses of life in Dharavi from the bustling main market street to the interior lanes and the insides of what we call live-work spaces or the tool house, a housing typology that enables both economic and domestic activities under the same roof. The tool house greatly supports the incremental needs of its inhabitants, but is unrecognized in the formal urban planning realm. By recognizing the tool house, we acknowledge the existing incremental development logic of Dharavi. So we have been working with residents, contractors, and artisans of Dharavi to design and produce tool house models that celebrate the typology and acknowledge the design imagination of the contractors and artisans, whose agency is usually dismissed in shaping cities. These models have traveled around the world, and some of them are part of the permanent collection of Asian housing typologies at the M+ Museum in Hong Kong. Working in Dharavi has taught us to recognize the value of locality. Every locality has human capital, existing constructions, and a rich natural ecosystem. If we are to value and care for place, we could gain much from replacing the tabula rasa approach with the tabula pronta, which affirms that the place itself is fertile, that it is inhabited, and that the conditions for its evolution are already there, if we only recognize them.
A second learning is that form follows the participatory process. We are convinced that change happens incrementally through immersive participation. And the first step we took to become a part of this process was to embed ourselves in the locality. This has also become our methodology when we work in other neighborhoods around the world. In this picture, you can see the brown and yellow building at the back, and that's where the urbz office is. And this is the Dharavi main road, just for context. Our starting point has always been the users, who are the primary experts of their locality. Every residence has agency to shape their environment and is guided by relation of care. The process includes documenting stories, people's relationship with the neighborhood, and their needs and aspirations. We do this through extensive interviews, through group discussions, through workshops, through neighborhood-level walks, and through neighborhood-level exhibitions.
Moreover, we soon recognized the role of the local contractors and builders of Dharavi and started to work with them. It is an ongoing mutual learning where we have learned their building techniques and they have begun to value the skills that we offer. Over the years, our consistent presence in Dharavi has enabled us to become a part of the community. The trust we have built has allowed us to work on several projects in different parts of Dharavi. Each project has allowed us to refine our participatory process. It begins with the residents and contractor approaching us to help with the redevelopment of their homes. We get hands-on with the residents to create layouts with bricks, which allows them to express their spatial needs and ideas better. In our experience from homegrown neighborhoods around the world, the design process can never be contained in a static drawing, but is dynamic and constantly evolving. The design, as we say, comes as we build.
In our mission to understand how homegrown neighborhoods are produced, in 2014, we facilitated a local contract at IG from Paraisopolis, Sao Paulo, to come to Mumbai. In this image, Marcela would recognize this image. You can see the conversation happening. It's a multilingual conversation that is happening between Ataiji from Paraisopolis and Pankaj, who is in white in this image. And they are sharing their knowledge of construction in homegrown neighborhoods from different cities, like homegrown practices from the two cities. This exchange continued with an urbz workshop in Paraisopolis, another homegrown neighborhood for context. The workshop tried to connect the two places by juxtaposing scenes from Dharavi onto similar locations in Paraisopolis.
Finally, our biggest learning from Dharavi is not to be afraid of what appears to be a mess, but to dive into it and reveal the underlying order. This deep dive can really help in meaningful co-creation. Okay. Participation can change the way we plan and design, really helping us to include qualitative aspects, to go beyond urban plans and go within neighborhoods, to understand process rather than impose form, and to co-create and embrace conflict rather than build consensus. We feel that community participation is an existing aspect of Indian cities that could inspire a new generation of urban planners and city officials. We are now going to present a neighborhood level project where we apply a methodology and approach derived from these learnings. Sacred Waters is one of the interventions within this project.
In 2023, with the support of RIAC Institute, we started work on the user-driven incremental development of an indigenous neighborhood in Dharavi called Kolivada. Kolivadas are settlements of indigenous fisherfolks of Mumbai. And this project is an important one for me because it's not just as an architect or an urbanist, but because I too come from the same community. My people, the Kolis, have been around before Mumbai was colonized, first by the Portuguese and then by British. Our existence predates colonial time, when the city was merely a cluster of islands separated by waters where my ancestors fished. On the left is the cluster of islands from the 17th century dotted with numerous kolivadas. My people had built their settlements along the coastal and estuarine landscape. Their knowledge of living on fluid geographies passed through generations. On the right, you see how the land was reclaimed to convert the islands into present-day Mumbai, a process that cut off the kolivadas from the sea and led to the loss of livelihood and displacement. Today, they are classified as urban villages. Yeah, I hope the map is clear enough. The project includes the site marked in red, the project site, which is the last remaining commons of the Dharavi Kolivada. The first phase of the project restores the site to strengthen and facilitate the access to the river, Meethi River. Dharavi Kolivada was cut off from the Meethi River by the large road built in 1980s. This is the present-day Dharavi Kolivada on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, on the right-hand side is the village, and on the left-hand side you can see the river and the estuarine landscape, and in the middle is the road that cut off the two. Till date, the Kolivadas maintain a village-like fabric in the busy city.
So this picture is from a workshop that urbz conducted back in 2008, where we discovered the willingness of the Koli community to explore all types of alternative ideas for development. Today, the entire neighborhood of Dharavi is threatened by a top-down speculative development project. Now, because of their indigenous status, the Kolis have been granted autonomy to develop their own habitat, and we are working with them on the first action-based comprehensive development plan of Dharavi Kolivada. Now, instead of a master plan as the starting point, need-based interventions will be triggers or actions that form the basis for the ABCD plan. These interventions were identified by the community. The ABCD plan includes people's participation, which is key to the project. To ensure this, we conducted a series of discussions, workshops, and public exhibitions with the Koli community. We also regularly attend weddings and we're part of the festivals in the village. So we recently completed the first intervention, which is the restoration of a historical structure into a study space. We are currently working on upgrading civic infrastructure and the Sacred Waters project.
The project addresses the most pressing concerns of the Kolis, our eroding connection with our watery habitats. For us, the environment is sacred, and the natural world has a divine agency which supports and interacts with our lives. In our worldview, it is the water spirits and our ancestors who determine the future of the community and the city at large. My community has kept abreast on the evolving modern city, without giving up attempts at preserving our ancestral connection to these waters. We commemorate nature by celebrating festivals like Narli Purnima, where every monsoon, on a full moon day in August, we renew our pledge to protect our habitats. While the city neglects its rivers, estuaries, and sea, my people continue with traditions of worshipping the water. Here you see an offering of coconuts being made to the river on the Nari Purnima day. The festival is a rare occasion when Koli women can safely approach the river in which their grandmothers went to fish. This image evokes the contrast between an indigenous community that celebrates their relationship with the natural world and a city that treats the river edge as landfill. This is the condition of the Methi River today. It is the most polluted river in the city and is subject to a tidal regime. The city continues to dump more sewage and waste, neglecting an important natural asset. In the foreground, you see a historical channel that connects the two arms of the river. And hidden, it is in this channel that the Dharavi Kolis consider that their village deity has emerged. Hidden in the mangroves, there are about 50 fishing ponds built and maintained by the Kolis as a response to the growing pollution in the river. In the background are the buildings of the city's commercial district. Despite the pollution, the Kolis continue to fish, as our relationship with the natural world is synonymous with our identity, making it important to preserve our habitat for the next generations.
Based on their ancestral knowledge, they have devised a system of collective pond making and maintenance. This system includes a series of bunds and sluice gates. The bunds separate the ponds from the polluted river and are made of silt dredged from the bottom of the ponds. The fishing ponds are a breeding ground for fish, crustaceans, and mollusks. Vegetables and fruit trees are also cultivated on these bunds. So these are sluice gates which control the flow of tidal waters into the ponds. They allow incoming high tides to enter and prevent the ingress of polluted low tides from upstream. So here is our friend Wilson Kohli helping us with research on the ponds. The Kohlis also propose to conduct tours of the ponds to spotlight its stressed ecology. It is a massive effort for them to maintain these ponds. While the catch is not as plentiful as it used to be, they still manage to catch some fish for their own consumption and sometimes even to sell at the village market. So the project includes the site marked in red, which is the last remaining commons of the Kohlis, and the main access to these fishing ponds. We've tried to mark those patches in blue in the river, which are the fishing ponds. So the first phase of the project restores the site to strengthen and facilitate access to these ponds. The road access, which Samidha mentioned earlier, basically cut off the ponds from the village, and it exposed the site, and it began to be used as a dumping ground or a landfill for construction waste, which is a major problem along the river across the city. So this is basically the site in its present condition. The community leadership decided to strategically rent out the site as a parking spot to prevent the dumping of waste.
The Dharavi Kolivada feels the need to restore the site and provide for livelihood, recreational and spiritual needs. We have been working closely with the Fishermen's Association, Women's Self-Help Group and Youth of Dharavi Kolivada to program and co-design the vision for the site. It is not always highly technical engineered solutions that are successful, but local community-led solutions that are provided to be the most effective in dealing with climate change and other environmental problems of our time. In the image, you see members of Fishermen's Association helping to test and refine their indigenous solutions to current environmental problems. The Koli women want the rest of the city to connect with Dharavi Kolivada through its cuisine. They emphasize the importance of having food stalls on the site that can cater to this need. Traditionally, the women have been responsible for the buying and selling of the fish and run the fish market in Kolivada.
So the vision for the project relies on an ecological imagination that grows from the Kolis' collective ancestral knowledge and expertise. In a city starved for open public spaces, this project shows the way forward through indigenous community-led planning. The site includes a dock and a boathouse for the fishermen, a coconut orchard around an existing tank, and a recreational upper level with food stalls for the women to sell Koli cuisine. So on the 16th of July, we started construction of the first phase. So construction here begins only after seeking blessings from the village deity and spirits of the land and water. Here we see the village head, Dominic Kinney, making a ritualistic offering of coconuts and flowers. The first phase includes the excavation of the construction debris, which is on the river's edge, and had reached to the tops of the coconut trees that the Kohlis had planted. Here we see local contractor Joseph Kohli overseeing the work. The excavated debris is placed and compacted on the other half of the site. Currently, his team is constructing a stone retaining wall, and we were really shocked by the amount of debris that came out of this excavation. It was almost a mountain, like 5 meters high.
The Kohlis believe that the project demonstrates the value of our community's history and its potential to help heal a very environmentally sick city. Is it possible to visualize an even more audacious future for the city? Is it the situation so bad and hopelessly destroyed that there is no possibility of regeneration? Given the history of turnarounds in urban planning, in which cities on the brink of ecological devastations have reversed their trends, perhaps there is still some hope. However, for this one, has to speculate, project, and fantasize.
So a few days ago, we visited the Museum of Art in Sao Paulo. We were moved by the volume of works that engage with the indigenous and environmental struggle. We felt a deep connection with a drawing by Daniel Caballero. We leave you with words from the description, the curatorial description. Once used for fishing, transport, and daily life, the Tamanduate River was progressively channeled, straightened, and degraded. This scene imagines the return of the wild, suggesting that even amidst collapse, the urban landscape can become a refuge, evoking new forms of kinship between the city and its ecosystem. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Samidha. Thank you, Kareena. Please take your phones as well as Eva, and we will sit here for the debate. Martin, please come, and we will start with the Agora a gente vai começar com uma apresentação. Eu falei assim porque eles estavam sem o fone. A gente vai começar com uma apresentação do Martin sobre o trabalho dele e depois seguido do debate, mas a gente já fica por aqui que ele não tem. He has not presentation on the screen, so we will sit here and listen to him from here, and then we start our debate. Okay? Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much. I would just like to take a few minutes, but please have a seat, Eva. I was very happy to see these two presentations and great lessons to learn from the different parts of the world. So I'm Martin Duplantier. I'm a French architect. I'm co-curating the French pavilion at the Biennale in Venice, at the today's Biennale in Sao Paulo, and we'll have another pavilion in Recife next month, and then in Chicago as well. All of that while tackling the issue of instability, in the chronical instability, whether climatic or geopolitical, and how this instability can feed our practices as architects, as landscape architects, as urban planners or designers. This is a real crucial thing to share, and that's the reason why we launched an open call throughout the world to gather about 300 projects that actually talk about this instability and how architects and architecture can be a leverage to actually find solutions together. And in my own, let's say, practice, so we're based in Paris, in Bordeaux, and we're also based in Ukraine, where there's also some kind of an instability at the moment. We've been working on a number of landscape issues on the seashore in the Basque Country, close to Spain, where actually the ocean is day by day hitting the cliffs and taking some meters of urban areas. We've been also regenerating the riverfront in Bordeaux. That was a project of 10 years long, and we freed the riverbanks from the old docks, concrete docks, to find again, retrieve the natural riverbanks. So that's also a process that we launched with the municipality and the different neighborhoods, etc. So long-term process. We've been also consultant for the city of Bangkok, also on the question of the riverbanks. But I think the one of the thing that really identify us is how we can actually put the different stakeholders together. We have again in France floods as everywhere. Actually, by the way, this is the 20th anniversary of Katrina. So 20 years ago in New Orleans, Katrina was hitting, and there was a seawall, and this seawall actually didn't protect the city. And we understood from that situation that whenever you think that a wall would protect you from these unstable world, that means you're actually not putting any attention to what you're building or how you're building, on the other side of the wall. And when the wall breaks, of course, this is a catastrophe. So all the solutions, the technical solutions of the 20th century are no longer relevant. And that's what we're trying to show in the pavilion throughout 50 projects that we illustrate. And I think there are lessons to learn from this variety. There's no ambition to be totally exhaustive, but to actually put question marks where we need to do so. And I would also like to say that one of our main sponsors is actually a company called CCR, which is a central company for reinsurance. And when we talk about all of these projects that we've seen here, whether post-flooding, post-catastrophe, or anticipating how to work with what exists, what is already there, there's always a question of funding. We've seen that with the diagrams of Eva, but and we see this also in the fires around LA, that a lot of people didn't have any insurance and have no home anymore and no ability to finance it again. So CCR is actually it's a very unique kind of model where it's a private and public company that actually refund all the insurance companies after such catastrophes, and this system is very stable, very well financed and well supported, and that enables everyone in France and also in the islands of Mayotte in the Indian Ocean to actually be able to put money on the table and think about how to rebuild. Of course, the idea is not to rebuild as it was, but to rebuild in an adapted way. And that's why they actually came to us, because they think that architects and architecture can be really a source of new starts and new futures for these unstable areas. And we're always complaining about the role of architects in the society and how difficult it is to influence local governance and laws in general. And to see this huge company coming to us and thinking, well, you guys, you might have more than engineers, or at least at the same level as engineers, some kind of ideas. I think that's also quite positive, and I'm happy to see that all parts of the world are here to talk about these important subjects of risks and vulnerabilities. Thanks.
Muito obrigada. Thank you, Martin. Vou pedir para quem for fazer pergunta, levantar a mão. Eu levo o microfone para que o pessoal da tradução possa traduzir. Pode ser? Então, temos aqui Marcela, a organizadora.
Boa noite. Boa noite, pessoal. Uma alegria escutar, né, sobre os projetos, e vejo que, assim, ambos os projetos, né, apresentados trazem muito a relação das águas, muito com os espaços públicos, né, e entendendo essa dimensão de relação, desde uma dimensão de lazer e recreação até uma dimensão produtiva, né, de relação com uma economia local e, por fim, até espiritual, né, chegando nessa dimensão do intangível, assim, de uma relação de pertencimento, entendendo que a comunidade local ela precisa, de fato, se apropriar, cuidar e pertencer a esse lugar, né? Ela já pertence. Então, como que a gente parte desse reconhecimento para poder avançar em desenhos de futuros e, enfim, de espaços que permitam essa instabilidade, né? Permitam a cheia e a vazante, enfim. E queria um pouco, na verdade, trazer nessa perspectiva mais pragmática de também essa relação de cooperação para viabilizar os projetos, né? Então, a gente está falando aqui de projetos, por exemplo, que conectam Norte e Sul Global. A gente está falando de projetos que também possibilitam trocas de tecnologias entre comunidades do Sul Global. E aí, então, um pouco a partir dessa provocação do Martin, assim, do seguro, enfim, da verba para viabilizar os projetos, como vocês veem como a gente pode avançar nessas cooperações para conseguir, de fato, implementar outros projetos e fortalecer essa troca de conhecimento e essa inteligência coletiva de tanta coisa que já é feita, né? Cláudia participa aí de vários movimentos aqui em São Paulo também. Então, acho que um pouco como vocês veem, né, possibilidades da gente avançar tanto na implementação quanto na troca de tecnologias de contextos tão parecidos, apesar de diferentes, né? Obrigada.
Ótima pergunta. Seria legal ouvir todos vocês na resposta, né? Martin já começou comentando as resseguradoras e tudo mais, mas o assunto é financiamento e troca. Quem quer começar? Want to start?
Yeah. So it's a really relevant question, and actually, when we were watching Eva present, we were so happy to see the cross between global experts like yourself, and really engaging very sensitively with the urban Indian context. And we feel like this intersection is important between the global and the local. And even events like this, today, it could be the start of something, like we've seen such diverse approaches and presentations. And so, yes, access to funding is always, for us, especially the way we work, is always a major hurdle. Usually it's the communities that, express their needs. So it's, we are really rigorous with this participatory process, and it's also very helpful to have projects emerging from within the community itself. And especially this one where, we have an indigenous community from where Samidha is a part of. And the environment is basically an extension of themselves. And we feel that in India, oftentimes, knowledge produced by indigenous communities and marginalized communities gets dismissed or overlooked, and their voices are not really included in the urban planning vision that the city tries to create. In fact, they are usually suppressed and dismissed. And we're very lucky to be working with project leaders like Dominic Kenny and Digambar Kohli, who are quite active, and they really care a lot for their communities. So yeah, I think maybe if Samidha, you want to add something?
Yeah, so since our approach to at looking these settlements is different, and it doesn't follow the traditional framework of big corporation or big funding or international organizations, we often find it difficult to have access to funding, and especially projects that are community-led. There is very minuscule amount of funding, and unless it is sanctioned or it is supported by local government, which is also rare because their interests are not in these projects. So it always becomes difficult. And this project also was possible because RIAC, the organization, that RIAC Institute that's also collaborating with the Biennale here, they provided us funding, and that's why we could start the project. And yeah, otherwise it's very difficult.
Obrigada. Eva.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's one of the key questions. How do we bridge this gap? And actually, as part of our work now for the upscaling in India, we try to engage with the private sector. And we found a lot of barriers. One barrier, which is interesting, is a taboo, that actually to speak about waste and wastewater, sewage, is a taboo. Nobody wants to engage with it. It also has to do with that there are actually regulations, and that many of the corporates don't actually fulfill those regulations. So the moment they engage in them, they would be called out. So that's one issue. How do we actually go beyond that? The other one is that everybody says we would need actually enforcement from the government. We need regulations because it needs to be the same for everyone. If one, or incentives for the early adopters, for pioneers, that we actually incentivize the adoption of nature-based solutions, for instance, or more sustainable, more restorative, more regenerative urban practices. And on the other hand, we found also that in the communities themselves, there is a readiness to start immediately, but then there is the lack of funding, really. And again, the lack of a sort of programmatic approach, a structural change in the governments that allows for these new type of solutions and innovation to happen, that may be more experimental and sometimes cannot guarantee success. So sometimes you need to risk failure also, and that needs to, I think, be built in more structurally into governance models.
Yeah, in general, with all the issues of adaptation, we know that €1, $1 invested today will save about $5 tomorrow. So there's clearly an economic sense of investing. But the problem is that most of the states are in debt, and nobody wants to pay this $1. So we have to find smaller steps to do so. And by engaging private entities, there's probably some kind of a leverage, but also we need to do some law enforcements so that the rule is there for everyone. And as an urban, chief architect of several cities or neighborhoods, I know that if the rule is not clear for everyone, then nobody is going to do so. And unless there's a catastrophe and there's a lack of water, like we can see in Ukraine, for example, where some cities have been surrounded by the Russians, no more potable water was found, and so they had to find critical solutions, but that's very, let's say, extreme. And I don't think we should generalize on this basis. So it's more the small steps thing, but it is still, I mean, the wall is still in front of us, and to climb it is going to be pretty hard.
Yeah, maybe adding to that, it's also that I think the urgency is not sufficiently clear for everybody. And when it's clear, then people often lose hope, but that we can actually engage design to overcome and to have solutions, because we have to imagine everything around us has been built by humans. And so it can also be unbuilt, it can be rebuilt in the same way, it can be rebuilt very fast, but we have to believe in it. If we don't believe in it, we won't make it. And so this tool of, for instance, scenario making, to actually show also what happens if we don't do it, and what happens if we do it, and what happens if we invest a lot, or if we invest a little bit, small steps, but to build this leverage to get there, to change the current situation. So the tool of design is extremely important, and the tool of actually culture and engage all the cultural creative energy is I think, underestimated, underfunded, and therefore doesn't have the leverage it could have.
No, just adding on that, I do believe that we need scenario making, but we also need kind of to build hope, to kind of bring it to present, right? So that's why the pilot projects and all the prototypes and all the hands-on approach is so necessary, so that people actually believe in the hope. We say here in Brazil, from Paulo Freire, which is a really important pedagogue. He used to say that hope is a verb, so esperançar, so we need to practice it. So in a way, I think it's also, both are important, right? How do we actually build something now that we understand that the change is possible, but at the same time build scenarios so that we can get more people to actually believe on it, right?
Aproveitar que a Marcela está com o microfone, por favor.
Bem, eu vou falar em português. Eu acho que há uma certa, eu não colocaria como oposições, mas como complementariedade, o fazer, o se aproximar da população, e ouvir, interagir, e estabelecer, pensar macrosistemas, como é o caso do 1000 Tanks, porque o problema de drenagens, como pensar a bacia hidrográfica, é de uma complexidade que não pode ser resolvida pedaço por pedaço, e sim necessita de um sistema para se articular. Mas o que me atrai nos dois projetos, né, é a construção de uma imagem forte, né, imagens fortes de desenho que engajam as pessoas nesse projeto. Né? Tanto os desenhos dos tanques, como quando eu vi o desenho de vocês da Sacred Waters, né, das águas sagradas, eu falei, está na exposição, né? Já escolhemos, porque ele traz ele não é simplesmente um desenho bonito, mas ele é um desenho que ele sintetiza uma visão de mundo, de cidade, de projeto, que faz sentido para vocês e é reconhecido pela população. E a mesma coisa o trabalho dos 1000 tanques, né, do Ooze, que eu conheci antes de saber que era do Ooze. E fiquei fascinado. Então, eu acho muito importante no pensar na arquitetura, quando nós construímos, por caminhos os mais diversos, né, essas imagens fortes que mobilizam, que contribuem para a mobilização, né, desses processos participativos, sem oposições entre escalas. E são projetos que, no caso, acho que eles se beneficiariam de ações do Estado, de um Estado democrático. Não? Quer dizer, porque eu não considero que a presença de governos a priori é ruim ou boa, depende de qual a orientação política desses governos, que nós temos aqui experiências que estão no Brasil, que estão baseadas na participação direta, no engajamento das pessoas, e temos experiências de governo, de Estado, que é completamente oposta, ditatorial, já tivemos, e conforme o nível do governo no Brasil, tem características ainda ditatoriais, apesar de estarmos numa democracia. Então, eu queria ouvir de vocês sobre como vocês concebem essas imagens fortes para se eu estou certo na interpretação ou não.
Muito bem, vamos segurar aqui. Tem mais uma pergunta ali, que provavelmente vai por esse caminho, mas vamos falar aí da democracia.
Vai sim por esse caminho. Primeiro, muito obrigado pelas apresentações, de fato, absolutamente instigantes. E a gente tem trabalhado bastante com essa temática, sobretudo com a temática da participação e da colaboração. E o que temos visto na nossa experiência é que nós lidamos todo o tempo com um problema de linguagem, principalmente porque nós trabalhamos com, fundamentalmente, a ideia da reconstrução física, material, mas também da reconstrução de imaterialidades, não é? E essa linguagem, quando nós nos propomos a trabalhar junto, não é? A viver junto, ela se transforma, ela ganha um protagonismo muito grande. Isso é o que nós estamos percebendo e, claramente, vocês também. Aqui no Brasil, nós temos um grupo, desde a década de 60, composto por 3 grandes arquitetos, Flávio Império, Rodrigo Lefebvre e Sérgio Ferro, que nos alertam há décadas de que o desenho ele é um instrumento de emancipação, de libertação, mas ele é também um instrumento de imposição, não é? Então, a minha pergunta vai no sentido, e acho que isso, Martin, também vai numa situação de guerra e de destruição e de reconstrução, enfim. A minha pergunta vai no sentido se vocês têm sentido a necessidade de organizar uma língua, organizar uma linguagem para essa comunicação. Porque o desenho tem também um aspecto lúdico e sedutor. Mas juntar essas coisas todas num instrumento que seja objetivo e eficaz é bastante difícil, não é? Por conta de todos os componentes envolvidos. Então, a minha pergunta é se vocês têm sentido necessidade de construir esta língua, esta linguagem, esse código que garanta reconstrução, que garanta democracia, que garanta emancipação e não reproduza os vícios que o próprio instrumento pode trazer de imposição. Acho que isso é uma coisa que nós estamos enfrentando no nosso laboratório e eu gostaria muito de ouvir vocês a esse respeito.
Vou passar novamente aqui.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. It's really interesting that you speak of, have we created any tools or a code, a design code or a language? And that's something that, as architects, and I'm a landscape architect. In fact, I studied in the Netherlands. And I was always quite amazed by the Dutch approach to design and the kind of processes they have in place. And then I come back to India and I see that, we can't really, sometimes in India, especially in urban Indian context, like you said, design can be a tool of emancipation, but it can also be a tool for imposition and as a tool of power. And then you have to think about, who's doing the designing, who's really producing these visions, how do we really produce a shared vision? And for us, methods of participation and really kind of engaging deeply with the communities we work with and developing tools that go beyond architecture and our perceived role, as architects and designers and planners. Like, how do we expand the definition of our position as architects, and how do we, really engage with other disciplines? Because a building is never just an object in itself, or a plan is never just something that is static on a wall, but it really impacts people's lives. So I would say the most important process that our practice focuses on is developing these tools of participation so that we can be more inclusive. And then we can really contribute our skills as architects and planners to create like a shared vision, which is not a vision that is ours alone, but that comes really from the ecological or the imagination of the communities involved in these projects.
Muito bem. Não vamos esquecer da democracia. Vocês todos trabalham. You all work in various countries. Don't forget democracy, because it was the first question.
Yeah, so maybe I could try to answer with my experience in Ukraine, which is a country that is facing an aggression, and at the same time trying to lead a process of decolonization, so reconstruction through decolonization, and it's a big debate. Of course, we're in the eye of a storm now, so it's not really the best moment to debate about what is Ukrainian, what is Russian, what is from the empire, and what can be accepted as a heritage from the Ukrainian people. It's of course very touchy and extremely difficult, and me as a foreigner, I'm let's say, on one side, not always the right person to talk about it, and on the other side, actually, because I'm neutral, I mean, I'm from abroad, I can have a fresh eye on it, and I can also try to look at the heritage as something that is more dynamic than something that is maybe 20th century kind of conservative, look. And that's why I'm trying to promote, and that's why I'm trying to bring UNESCO to look at a heritage in a much broader way, so that it is something like an ingredient in your recipe that you can work on. And we're publishing right now a book on Ukrainian school atlas. I mean, so we're browsing all of the schools, and mostly Soviet schools of Ukraine, and because they were very closely designed to, let's say, bring an ideology and a control over generations, their design is very formal. It's very, there's no room for interaction or informal meetings or community spaces, etc. So that's clearly not. And we try to promote a change in these architectures while keeping the buildings. So it's some kind of a transformation, adaptation, not for climatic reasons, not only, but also for the sake of communities and social life, which is extremely important, even more in a country at war, where communities are suffering very much. So yes, architecture and language in general is renewed, and there is a clear need and will to write this common language together. And as we talked with Walter before, modernism in Brazil was a tool for emancipation. Well, I believe so as well in Ukraine. Architecture will also, and this new and up-and-coming architecture will also be a tool for liberation and emancipation.
Okay, thank you. That's now 3 big questions. I think I'm going to take the one of Renato first with the narrative and then go to democracy and the tools. So when we start in a place, it starts with a deep listening. And deep listening means listening to communities, listening to people who live there day by day. They have a lot of intrinsic knowledge. And it also means to actually listen to the territory, to go into depth in history and into deep time. And that's where it really links usually with the democratic idea, because the colonization is not something, it's not something that is done since 200 years or 500 years, but it is something that actually humans did to nature since a much, much longer time. Megafauna has been eradicated in, for instance, Australia as soon as humans arrived. And to actually restore our and renew our relationship and rethink our relationship, how that is actually can be not colonizing, but can be in tune, in peace. And interestingly, the word peace, when we go back to the root of the word peace, which is shalom, but also salam in Arabic, it means to restore, to make whole again. So that actually our relationship with nature to make that whole again, I think sits at the root of many conflicts. And in that way, how actually we live in the urban environment that is alien to us, that is at war with all the other species, can never lead to a true democratic and inclusive situation. And so in our practice, the tools that we try to employ is actually what we could call thinking through drawing, actually the drawing tool that we have as architects, and to visualize through actually the aspect, let's say many times I cannot find the words, but by drawing it, I can find connections, and the arrow to actually literally, you might have seen it many times in our visuals, is a tool to think and to interthink these connections. There is a great teacher that emigrated, I think, from Czechia to the US, Georgi Kepes. He wrote a book about the interthinking. And I can just recommend it. It's great, and it's, I think, a practice that we need to do to weave and stitch everything together again.
Thank you. Mais perguntas? Eu tenho uma minha. I have one question myself, which is, we are now in the middle or in the beginning of the climate change crisis, and we need to scale up those solutions, but not in a top-down way. And we need to hurry. And between 3 factors, what do you think is the most complicated to overcome to make it faster, or if the 3 of them are at the same level, which is law, regulatory stuff, finance, money, or the scarcity of professionals that already have the skills to do those solutions.
Right. So actually, I'll just add a few things and then Samidha will take over. But, you know, I really feel like this sense of urgency, you know, that has kind of propelled us for the last many years to rapidly act and, you know, adapt to climate change. I think because of this sense of urgency, a lot of times laws, funds and resources are just pumped into solutions that might not really be well thought through and that might not really have, you know, traction and address the ground realities. So I really think that we need to take a pause, you know, before we just go like running with the sense of urgency and gathering. And we really need to take a pause and think about, think together, you know, with collectives and communities and local organizations about what we can do about this. And also I feel, you know, change always happens incrementally. And it might seem, you know, absurd to think that, okay, like incremental changes can finally contribute, but that's how, you know, traditions and were built, and a lot of Indian cities were built. So there is some value in that as well. And maybe I'll let Samidha say.
So what we have, of course, from our experience and working with community, what we have understood is that at grassroots, there is a lot of already happening. It's just that it's not translating in policies, frameworks at local level, which is like municipality, state, and federal level, or also as well as international level. We are still stuck with frameworks, etc., which probably are redundant at this point in time. And we have to rethink, because money is actually moving towards those frameworks. And especially global South countries would understand and agree that a lot of these frameworks are difficult to contextualize. So either the frameworks are more flexible, which can get easily contextualized, and rather than dismissing anything that's in front of us, we should rather try to understand how it happens and then try to build laws and frameworks that can govern them, which probably will be better. And I think democratization is also something that would eventually happen, democratizing of the processes, the frameworks that govern the urban spaces. And what was the third one? Professionals, yes. I think in today's time, a lot of professionals have, at least in architecture, urban planning, and also engineering, a lot of them have changed their perspective, their approach towards looking at things. It's not like the 21st century post-war modernization era. We have, as a community of architects, urbanists, etc., have moved beyond that, and we are looking at climate action and climate adaptation and mitigation more seriously. Unfortunately, I know that when we do projects, unfortunately, our approach, or our philosophies, or what we truly believe doesn't get translated into projects. And I think that's the problem. And when the project is where the profession, the law, and the money actually come in and try to have interaction with each other. And I think architects in the room would agree to the fact that how much we have to sort of change our perspective or like change our approach when it comes to certain projects where the government and international money is involved.
Obrigada.
Should I go first? I think it's a very difficult question. I think actually that the three need to come together, that we cannot have one without the other, and that we should, when they come together, build indeed very powerful demonstration projects where finance all the professionals, because we need a holistic solution. So we need a solution that works across society. that where everybody is engaged, and we need people to see this, to experience it, to feel it, to smell it, to live it, to swim in there, so that they can believe that this future is possible. And there is a very good artist and activist, Rob Hopkins, the founder of Transition Towns, and he now focuses on a slogan. It's, I've been to the future and we won. So it means we project us, let's say 10 years into the future, and then we come back, and then, so he's running labs, and he has made all his work, I encourage you to listen to it online, to labs, basically it's like people dress up like astronauts, and then they start to think, okay, how does the future smell, and how do we develop that? So that, I still think the biggest obstacle is between our ears, and we need to overcome this with shared experiences that make people believe it's possible.
Yeah, and if we take, let's say, Paris, which I know pretty well because I live there, and maybe Dhaka in Bangladesh, we can see that the obstacles are very different. In Dhaka, they have 1 million of climatic immigrants every year. They have to host them, they have to feed them, they have to build schools for them, etc. And they have no finance for it. So it's a huge issue. And if you take Paris, it's according to the GIEC studies, it's going to be the less livable city in 2050 in Europe because it's so dense, and we're blocked by our laws that do not enable us to change the roofs. We have zinc roofs. Under zinc roofs, it's almost 60 degrees during the summer, so it's unlivable, and it's UNESCO protected, etc., etc. So it's just a huge mess. And on the street level, although we have a very progressive mayor, Anne Hidalgo, we're trying to plant trees, etc. But the money that needs to be put on the table to actually gather all of the ducts and networks, etc., to free room to plant trees is so huge that we just can't do it. So we just do bicycle lanes and next to the regular car lane and then the pedestrian paths, and we end up with absolutely no green, no additional green. So that's tricky. We haven't found a solution there. But we can see that what I wanted to say is that according to each context, these number 1, 2, 3 can vary a lot.
It's actually, I met Aitan from Roofscapes, and so they basically want to bring green roofs to all Paris to limit the temperature. And he told us that he was in a meeting where basically the conservative preservation department of Paris, in all sincerity, proposed to pump water from the Seine onto all roofs to cool them. And so yeah, it's quite interesting.
Thank you.